So we asked the question first to our panel. In the fight against AIDS and service to those who are living with AIDS, how have you experienced the intersections of sexuality, sexual orientation, and gender? And we're going to start all the way down on the other end down there. Would you share first with us, brother, and then we'll come this way.
Well, good evening to everybody here. I was caught unawares, actually. I thought we were going to start over there. Don't we all?
It's Pentecostal. You have to be ready for something.
I noticed. As a journalist in my country, I get to meet the people. A journalist paints the portrait of society to society. So I'd like to think of myself as the Rembrandt of my society. But sometimes I cannot paint a pretty picture when it's not there, when it's not pretty. And intersections that I've come across, some personal, some professional, have seen me come across a society that is beaten into the ground, that doesn't exist. There's no MSM. There are no gay people in Zimbabwe, apparently. But what happens is when you beat people into the ground, they emerge as something else. So we would then have a lot of people in the closet who come out, as in come up and marry your daughters because they want to conform, to be seen to be conforming. And that's an intersection between somebody's real self and the person you want them to be. And that is when we see the disease moving from one community to another. And it brings me to the realization that I was awoken to this morning, that there are no gated communities. There are no Noah's Ark where we think we are isolating these people, and if we beat them into the ground because of their sexuality, they won't exist. And that makes the disease such a greater crisis. And the problem is the church is in on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because these people do not exist. They are not loved. Mm-hmm. God does not want to see them. Mm-hmm. And that creates a serious crisis, a serious problem. And sadly, it exists because society wants us to hide our heads in the sand and pretend a certain demographic of people, not creatures, not just some creature, people who deserve dignity, honor, and love, are being forced to pretend they don't exist and to assume different characters, different characteristics. Yes. And that is how I've come across society, how I've interacted with society. And as I said, as a journalist, you get to meet people. And I've actually written a book about a friend of mine who was in a similar predicament, and he died aged 22, left behind a wife and 5 or so lovers, male lovers, obviously, because he had to become somebody that he was not. Mm-hmm. And that is an intricate intersection as far as I'm concerned, because there are a lot of layers that we can unpack and uncover. Yes. And that was a very touching sort of intersection as far as I was concerned.
Thank you so much. McDonald, how do these intersections live out in Malawi?
To me, they are shrouded by denialism that those people don't exist. It's a taboo, and we don't talk about taboos, because in so doing, we'll be unraveling that something that is unpleasant to us. Certainly, it's a blind side of the faith community. Faith communities are not comfortable to talk about things that are not pleasant to them because of the tendency of them and us. And because they are, we forget that we are. And yet the whole principle of Ubuntu is surrounded by that kind of understanding. But because we don't want to lose our comfort, we don't want to come out of the shell, we want to say, no, it's none of our business. And we passionately talk about wrong things because that's not about us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. Maxisi, can we talk about this in the context of Uganda?
Good evening, everyone. I believe what my colleagues have said do exist. What else are we looking at when we talk about sexuality, orientation, and gender? As a person who is a human rights activist, human rights and HIV/AIDS activist, I find a very big problem if I don't have to advocate for the rights of LGBTQ community. Then I don't qualify to call myself an activist, because human rights are for all. When we talk about access to services, it's for all. As a founder of a community-based and faith-based organization, this is where I get problems with my religious leaders to draw a line between this community and the other. Whereas for us, we think and we believe it goes together. Look at the adolescents who have been infected by HIV. This is another scenario of the AB in the Catholic Church. Abstinence and be faithful to who? To a friend, to a fiancé. These are children who are born with HIV, have grown with it, and they cannot talk about it with their partners because that is what our culture dictates. A woman is submissive, has no strength to negotiate for sex, and now she's sexually active, and she's positive. And if she's not empowered enough, what do you think she's going to do? Will she say no to sex because she has the desires and she has got this partner? I'm counseling many, many young people who are infected by HIV. When they're asking a lot of questions, they are asking themselves a lot of questions. Why me? Why did my parents have to give birth to me when they knew they had HIV? And then she comes to you and tells you, you know what? I performed badly last term just because my partner learned about my relationship from my mother. What can we tell the youths? To abstain, to be faithful, and don't talk about the condom? What preventive measure are you talking about when you're dealing with the youths? It's a challenge. And then when we talk about LGBTQ and HIV in Uganda, in religious institutions, the names we are given do isolate us and discriminate us. For example, myself, a person living with HIV for the past 16 years. There are those names like Slimu. Many of you might have heard about them. Slim. It's just losing weight, yeah? Mukenenya, it's like growing thin. It's so discriminative in society. And then it is perceived as if it's only through sex. So in a community, it is that person who might have had many partners, slept with so many men to catch HIV. I was very honest to my husband, very honest for over 10 years. And when I just suspected he has caught AIDS in HIV in 1998, I was so nervous. Every time I could kneel down and say, God, save me, because I'm very innocent. But I could hear a voice telling me, do you think you are the only innocent person to die out of this scourge? Wow. And when I went for a test, I was down there praying and saying, God, I have always been telling you, I've served you, I've done everything, look at my children, and I'm innocent. I've never slept with any man outside my marriage. But that voice could speak to me, are you the only innocent person? Then if you criminalize me, stigmatize me, call me names, and think it was out of multiple partners that I got HIV, then you perceive me wrong. Then another thing is LGBTQ community. Still the names are so discriminative. And then, if this is the feeling, one feels like having this single-sex partner, it's very difficult to draw out that feeling of a person. But how do we help? By making a private bill of anti-homosexuality. Does it help? Or we need to do something? As our brothers and sisters in that community continue to perish in the HIV and AIDS scourge. So it's a complex issue. When we talk about sexuality and gender, it's very complex. Going back to our norms and cultures, where we don't have to talk about a few things, like what MacDonald has said, many priests have perished in Uganda because they can't talk about that. That is a sin. A priest who is supposed to serve mass, and then how do you catch AIDS? You can't talk about that. So they have died without even going to access medication because you can't talk about it, and then you are so holy. So it is a very big challenge.
Thank you, sister.